If your teacher gives up on you when you're not entirely sure of yourself, you're going to give up on yourself. Teachers are telling them you're not going to become anything useful tomorrow. An example, there was a student in my school. Every time during the class, he'll be playing games. And the teacher will come in and ask him, why are you playing games? You dullard, you failed your exams last year and you're here playing games. Now he builds games. Here in Nigeria, if you're not a student, you're going to be flogged. It was moving from that system to a college where it was more of detention. Can you take some time to reflect on your actions? I was taught how to times X and divide X, but I didn't know how to pay my taxes. How many times am I timesing X in real life? And how many times am I paying taxes in real life, right? So we have realized what the issues are. I'm a lawyer right now, but guess what? Most of the students that got first class in law today are not the best SANs. The best SANs in the field are those that have third class, just got a pass or barely made it through.
Please just be quiet. You're doing too much.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's lovely to be here. My name is Prada Uzoduma. I'm a lawyer and education advocate and a disability advocate. So I love talking about education. I love advocating for good quality education and also for access for people with disabilities.
Yeah, nice. I love that. And I love meeting people also that are in the education space and passionate about education, because it's for the next generation. If we really care about success and the economy, you should also care about education as well as the individuals as well. One question first is, for your schooling experience, Prada, when you were a child, do you actually think that your schooling experience contributed to who you are today and your success? Or do you accredit it to something outside of school and education?
I can't deny that in terms of foundational, various levels, primary, junior secondary, senior secondary, college, uni, did play a part in who I've become today. And for me, going to school wasn't just about writing exams and passing them. It was about learning some skills, interacting with people, teachers, peers, cultures, things that I can't deny, play, a key part of who I am today and the things that I aspire to become tomorrow.
Were you the studious student? How were you in terms of relationally with your teachers? Just kind of give us a little bit of a picture of your schooling experience, secondary school.
So secondary school, I did my secondary school in Nigeria, in Lagos. It's a school called Rainbow College. I think from year, what they call just 1 to SS3 before I went abroad. Yeah, I think in that state of my life, I was very rebellious, doing all the stuff that they said we shouldn't do, breaking all the rules and all of that. It was quite interesting to go from that type of human being, which is a very rebellious teenager, a prefect, I'd say, in my college. But I think one thing that stood out for me was the environment. When a teacher is passionate, it also tells not just in how they teach, but in how they give, what I say, mentor the students, right? So I think the difference there was, for me, having more teachers in college that believed in my potential, believed that maybe I was rebelling for some reason, as opposed to just casting me out, which was the thing here in Nigeria. It was more about, why are you being naughty? Can't become anything, the slurs, the usual, focusing on the problem instead of focusing on the why, which I think is something that is quite distinct. But I feel like I had teachers that believed that I could be more than a naughty child, and there was a lot of potential that I could, give back. Having that change, being a rebellious child to a prefect for me in college just told me that, what, Prada, you can actually be more and you can turn up this confidence, something else. I, for example, as a prefect, had to check students were neatly dressed. It meant automatically that I would be neatly dressed, right? As opposed to maybe in Nigeria where I wasn't maybe giving a prefect, or I wasn't told to become a prefect because maybe I wasn't abiding to the schools on dress regulations, right? So I think it was more of finding a different coping mechanism in college as opposed to here in Nigeria where it was a thing of maybe being cancelled.
So good, because that's actually really true. And I've taught in the UK and Nigeria, and I can definitely see the difference. And it's so interesting that you were the rebellious child, but in Nigeria, it was seen as, this one. Maybe, because how in Nigeria, they almost, let's say, for example, like Toby is the naughty child. They'll be like, you have Toby in your class, good luck, all the best. Like, they've already, whatever you get out of Toby today they've cancelled him, yeah. But then you're right. In the UK, in the US, overseas, it's always about, why are you behaving like that? There's a root. We need to find out the root. Is it home life? Is it attention? Yeah. It's interesting that you went from being the rebellious child to now being a deputy head girl, right? In college. Would you say that you changed and you decided to be better? Or would you say that the environment almost encouraged you to be more positive in the decisions that you were making?
So I think I'd always say it's a bit of both. When I was in Nigeria schooling, I was say I was between 9 and 15, right? When I was in college, I was between 16 to 18. There's the role of maturity growing up. In college, I'm thinking about what do I want to study at the university. I'm going on to university soon. I'm preparing myself for university, right? I'm trying to chart my career path for myself. Whereas in Nigeria, I'm looking up to WAEC. WAEC is the biggest thing as of then. There's no pressure to like make big decisions like where you want to go to school, in terms of university, the course you want to study, who you want to become tomorrow. So I think a part of it was me just growing up, maturing as an adult. But at the same time, I would say also the environment. There was a more positive environment in my college than in Nigeria in terms of cancel culture. There were even students I would say were maybe more naughty than me when I went to college, but it was the way, the manner at which they were dealt with. Here in Nigeria, if you're a naughty student, you're going to be flogged. I was moving from that system to a college where it was more of detention. Can you take some time to reflect on your actions and why you were naughty? Right. So, but for me, I think I'll say I was lucky to have a good foundation because my primary school was a British international primary school, right? So even when I was naughty in primary school, I knew what detention was, right? So it was more of good. So for me, it was like a very up and down transition. So it was going from primary school, a British primary school here in Nigeria, to going to a proper Nigerian international boarding school, then going all the way to the UK to do my university. So first of all, when I went to my Nigerian primary school, it was a shock. We went from going to the naughty corner and going to detention to being whipped for bad behavior,
Oof.
right?
When did you actually discover your passion for social justice, inclusive education? Was that something that you discovered in secondary school? And were you inspired? Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I think, let me frame it as maybe like humanitarian activities. Right? I lived in Lagos then, with the family. We used to go to church every Sunday, and there were like these let's say less privileged beggars that used to stand at the church gates then, right? So what we do is then my dad would give us like money for ice cream after church and all of that, right? So we used to go and buy the ice cream after church sometimes until we noticed that this less privileged beggars used to stand by the church gates, right? So what we do is instead of buying the ice cream, sometimes we give them the money for the ice cream, right? Because maybe you see like maybe a mom with her child or someone as young as you are begging and saying that, oh, they haven't eaten today. And in my mind, I'm wondering, you haven't eaten today. I probably get home. I'm going to say, oh, I don't want to eat this rice. I want to eat this. I don't want to eat that. I have options. You don't, right? I've been starving for only God knows how long. It was just a thing in me when people that needed help and he could help. Why not help? So fast forward to then going to school in London and all of that, from college, university, postgraduate and all of that, and seeing, access. When I mean access, I'm talking about for people with disabilities, seeing disability inclusive toilets, accessible airports, accessible transport systems, and then coming back to Nigeria and realizing that those things don't exist here. Right. So what it means automatically that a large population of Nigerians are ignored, mainly because they have disabilities. What it means is there's no access for them. There was no consideration for that. So it was just a thing of, again, if you can help, why not help? Right. So that is why with TALI, what we do is not hand out wheelchairs or, share rice on Easter or Christmas Day. We focus on policy, things that are sustainable, things that question people as to why don't we have accessible toilets, accessible transport, right? That can allow these people live lives just as you and I. They don't have physical disabilities, right? And another thing is, why is someone with a disability only looked at as someone that should have a mobility issue? What about invisible disabilities, things like educational disabilities in school, right? So it was the fact that, that same question, if you can help bridge this gap for people with disabilities, why not? But I'll say, I think that was something that I had by myself. growing up, maybe family values, maybe church, going to church and all of that, but it just instilled something in me that was, if I can help, why not?
Sometimes it's one of those things where you're not taught it. It's just exposure. It was that one encounter that you had where you're like, wait, you haven't eaten? Like, you have to come to it face to face and realize, oh, this is a problem. Some people hear about, disabilities and hear about, the lack of access, and they're not invoked, they're not moved. So that's when you know that, okay, like I always feel that there's some sort of social justice in everyone. I just feel like people haven't yet discovered what that is. For yourself, immediately, it's accessibility. It's recognizing those that are struggling with disability. I think for me personally, it's recognizing children from poor backgrounds that don't have access to the same quality of education as those who are from affluent backgrounds. And so having their lives predetermined because of either their how much money they have, the type of family that they're from, the color of their skin. And that disturbed me as a 16-year-old when I first heard certain statistics. Where do you think that confidence for you came from? And then also feel empowered to do something about it? Because, some people, they also probably had a similar story to you, but maybe they weren't empowered or encouraged to start up a whole organization and actually center their career around it.
If you're enjoying this conversation so far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, comment your thoughts below, and make sure to subscribe. Don't forget to click that notification bell so that you're notified every single week for a new upload.
I think from two things, right? College definitely helped with my confidence, becoming a prefect, chairing those assemblies, managing students, dealing with teachers, being the rep for students when it came to, passing across student views, students' complaints, and all of that. And then from the family as well, right? So I'm someone that grew up watching my father, confidently carry himself, lead other people, so for me, confidence was something that it was a normal thing in the family, right? So it was me watching my dad always leading people, right? And people following, right? So if he didn't take me out of that environment, I wouldn't have known that was something that was different to someone else. Do you get what I mean? So it was like, this is what I grew up knowing, right? So it also came naturally as well, right? It was my dad constantly telling me every day, you can do this, you're better than this, anything you want to achieve, you can become, those positive values reinstilled in me over and over again.
Imagine coming from a family that they're not so confident, or you're confident and they're almost dimming your light that, look, you're doing too much. Okay. Just stay in your lane. You would carry that through to school. And then imagine your teachers also saying the same thing. Please just be quiet. You're doing too much. You're never empowered, to really push through. When you look at people that are successful, so you can think about yourself, you can think about maybe friends that you have, people that you're exposed to. Are there key attributes to success when you see it in people that, a lot of people that are successful tend to be like this, or tend to have this particular skill, or tend to know something?
I was watching something, I think 2-3 days ago, and it was a lady, I don't really know what her name is. She was talking about kids that go to affluent schools, right? And kids that go to maybe working class schools, right? And she said, notice something, right? There's always a difference in the sports that they play. I'll give you an example. So in my college, for example, the sporting activities that were there were horse riding, fencing, what I mean. And when I was in junior secondary, right? Let me bring that. Even though the school was quite expensive, I would say, for a Nigerian school. The activities were football, basketball, so and so and so. And she said it's a silent message, it's a silent lesson that they're instilling in that child. What is the difference between those type of sports? Fencing, horse riding, it's something that you do individually. You don't rely on a team for the success of when you're riding a horse. It's you, right? When you're fencing, it's you. There's no team backing you. It's just you versus your opponent, right? But things like basketball, football, it's a team effort. No matter how good you are, you must work with the team. And she says, what we notice in entrepreneurs or successful people today is they need to be empowered to do things individually, right? So that when they are put in positions to carry teams, they can carry teams, right? And those things go as far back as the type of sports they played in primary schools and secondary schools and all of that, right? And it got me thinking.
Wow.
And I agree completely with what she was saying, right? There's that mentality of my success, my results, boils down to what I do and how I do it. So you see that successful people, they're depending on themselves to help themselves and to become, they're not saying the government didn't provide this opportunity, right? Or these are my challenges. Focusing more on the results, right? And how they can get those results by themselves. I'm not undermining the importance of teamwork, right? But what I'm saying is that can be added value, right? And not a reason to give up, right? So it's more of if I was fencing and so I have to wake up by myself, practice, on my own skills, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Basketball, you know what? There's this guy that runs fast. So once I hand him the ball, he will run fast. Do you know what I mean? So my results depend on me entirely. You focus yourself to be the best entirely. When you know that your results depend on teamwork, you focus yourself on getting a good team. That is why as adults, when we come to the world and we see that the government isn't doing what they're supposed to do, so, I don't have as much, parents didn't grow up with a lot of money, you focus on how other people can help you become what you want to become as opposed to you becoming that thing entirely and by yourself. Right? Do they need other people? Once in a while, everyone needs somebody, right? But majority of the time, you notice that successful people are carrying majority of the things, the weight by themselves, right? And they're depending on themselves entirely to achieve those results, not relying on teamwork and other external factors.
So interesting that I can see that perspective. I think I agree. I think definitely you can't lean too much on the teamwork. And I do agree in terms of basically what you've described is like the individualistic theory, the idea that everything that happens to you is based on what you have put out. And I do agree with that. But then I also think that if we are so focused on that, can we really be like effective leaders as well? Knowing how to recognize people's strengths, delegations, etc. That's kind of like my thought process immediately when you said that. But I think having the right balance, I guess. But I do like the fact that what you said in terms of who do we blame and, are we just looking at the government to fix everything for us, or do we just control our own narrative, which I think is perfect. So what would you have liked to have seen more in your schooling experience in secondary that would have given you a better stead, a better experience, things that you've learned when you were much older in college or later on in life that you thought, if I had known this when I was 12 or 13, might have changed a bit of the trajectory? What would you say?
Teachers, right? Out of the school infrastructure and the school system, teachers are the ones that actually have that day-to-day interaction with the students, right? And they're like the closest point of contact. So I think it's a thing where if your teacher gives up on you when you're not entirely sure of yourself, you're going to somehow give up on yourself. If your teacher looked at you and said, you're not going to become anything tomorrow, you don't know math and English, what is wrong with you? Why can't you grab this information? It's going to affect your self-confidence. I'll give you an example. There was a student in my school, for example. He wasn't so academically smart, right? Which was he couldn't read, memorize, and write back when it came to exams. But guess what? I'll just say that he probably makes more money than I do today because every time during the class, he'll be working at the system, he'll be playing games, right? And the teacher will come in and ask him, why are you playing games? You dullard, you haven't even read your English, you haven't read your literature, you failed your exams last year and you're here playing games. This guy left secondary school and he went to school in Canada or something like that, right? And now he builds games. Do you know what I mean? So he built games, right? I'm pretty sure the difference between the system that he was here in Nigeria and where he went to school in Canada was that they focused on his strengths of, you like playing games, right? How can we monetize this? Do you got it? We've seen that this student clearly is not interested in doing things the traditional way by knowing the maths, the English, and all of that, right? But look at his talent here and how much are people being paid currently for this skill? They say not, right? So why don't we look that side of his life, right? If we had teachers that didn't give up on students, that believe that no matter how bad you think a student is in terms of academics, are they strengths that we can maximize? Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think one is potentialless, right? You have potential. It takes a great mentor, a great teacher, good parents to bring out those potentials. So if we have teachers and systems where they are quick to give up on students, it's not encouraging for the student. So I think if we had more positive teachers, more teachers that, the assignment is not to get the student to read and write and pass the exams, but the assignment should be to build potential out of what the student is, right?
Yes.
So not all the students are going to become the best in math or the best in English. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm a lawyer right now, right? But guess what? Most of the students that got first class in law today are not the best SANs in the field. The best SANs in the field are those that have third class, just got a pass, or maybe, barely made it through. And those are the best lawyers today, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter how good the academic system is, and not to take anything away from the system, right? Being the best to memorize something and put it back on paper doesn't make you the best in life. The fact that I can memorize this and pour it back as thought, it doesn't guarantee me success tomorrow. You see the argument every time on Twitter. I was taught how to times X and divide X, but I don't know how to pay my taxes. Do you know what I mean? Things that, how many am I timesing X in real life? And how many times am I paying taxes in real life, right?
I 100% agree with you. I think your exact reasoning is why I even run my own NGO, and one of the programs that we have is all about skills development, getting young people to discover their skills from young at, regardless of where you enter, whether you're a gamer, lawyer, accountant, there are certain skills that actually matter more than just the knowledge. Do you have critical thinking? Do you have professional etiquette? How do you speak? And exposing these young people to that. And I love what you said about the teachers, because there needs to be some sort of training for teachers. And this is one of the things that we do as well, is we get teachers to be able to realize that, okay, you're a maths teacher, but as a maths teacher, how do you develop critical thinking? As a maths teacher, how do you develop problem solving in the real world? Make it relevant, make it real to what people are actually doing. And so I can't agree any more to what you've said. The teachers, we need to be more aware. I'm thinking about even my husband right now. He's a data consultant. And I remember I've been with him for 10 years. And so we went to like university, not together, but we were together in university. And when we were in university, he didn't know what he wanted to do. And that's because he wasn't exposed to his industry now. And if only, he had people that would be like, I think you should go into tech, I think you should go into this, or have a look at this. It was just the typical routes, no offense, but the typical lawyer, doctor, accountant, not realizing that, okay, there's so many more professions. There's so many different roles. And I think you're right. I think the teachers do have a due diligence to be aware of the different roles and expose young people that actually there's not just 3 or 4 jobs in the world. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And just really seeing how, seeing your experience going from, this secondary rebellious child, but also being in an environment that was kind of clashing essentially. And then going out to college in the UK and being in a completely different environment that almost nurtured certain things out. And I love what you said as well about being the deputy head girl and having to lead in assemblies, because it shows us that, certain experiences that we go through really shape us. And the fact that you had that experience now, like you said, you can just go to a meeting a bit unprepared and I mean, obviously I know you prepare, but you can be thrown in a really uncomfortable situation and thrive. A lot of people can't do that, because they've always been safe. They've always been in a comfortable position. And I think even your outlook in life, like obviously when people have the privilege to travel and live in different countries, like the person that I have going on, when this is out last week, he lived in the UK, then he now got a job and now went to Hong Kong, then he's lived in Japan, and all of these, it just opens your eyes and exposes you to more, right? But being Nigerian, we want to come back and do more and help the system that we're in as well. Before we go, I don't know if there's 1 or 2 things or last thing that you want to kind of leave with anyone watching.
I really feel like there's a lot, especially here in Nigeria, that the education system really needs a total revamp. So I think just like I spoke about the students that depend on teamwork and those that depend on their individual selves, I think we've realized what the problems are with the educational system here in Nigeria. So for us parents, for us teachers, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to focus on discussing those challenges every day, or do we want to start preferring solutions to them? I know very few schools that have that as a course or as a subject. Funny enough, in February, I went back to my college, and that is a subject now. And they were telling me about how they went to compete out of the UK, about making games and all of that. I was like, really? So this is a subject here. We know that our education system is not where we want it to be. We've seen that gap. While we were, filling it up, government side, can we also work on equipping our children, with the necessary skills that they can also explore, forcing them to go through the traditional route that is not really beneficial for them as adults tomorrow. And even as teachers, we know that okay, the students are maybe mandated to learn math in a very traditional way, but can we get them to focus on the critical thinking aspect of the maths as opposed to just learning how to solve those equations? So we have realized what the issues are. It is time to start preferring solutions as opposed to dwelling on the issues, right? So I think that should be the final thing that I leave to anyone watching this today.
Okay, thank you so much, Prada.
If you found this episode insightful and enjoyed it, please don't forget to give this a thumbs up and comment below your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you're reminded for a new upload every single Thursday. So I'll see you in the next episode.